Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar titled Leading with Livestock, Integrating Agricultural Methane Mitigation into NDCs 3.0, which is organized by the Climate and Clean Air Coalition. And before we begin, allow me to go through a few brief housekeeping rules to ensure that the session runs smoothly. All participants' microphones and videos will remain turned off during the session to minimize background noise and ensure clear audio from our speakers. However, during the Q&A session, we will be able to invite all participants to engage more directly with the videos and microphones. We also encourage your active participation throughout the webinar. Please use Q&A box in the Microsoft team at any time to submit your questions to the speakers, and we will address as many as possible during the Q&A portion. And also feel free to introduce yourself in the chat box. You can share your name, country, and affiliation, and we'd love to hear more about your role in NDC development, whether you're from the government or non-governmental institution, scientific institute, or international organization. We also kindly ask our speakers to stay within their allocated time. And today's webinar is being recorded, and the recording, along with the presentations, subject to speakers' agreement, will be made available on the CCAC event page in the coming days. And we hope that you find this session insightful and inspiring for your work. And let me introduce and hand over to Greg Kohler, our agricultural expert at the CCAC Secretariat, to open today's session and to share the key recommendations for integrating agricultural methane into NDCs. Greg, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ambina, and welcome everyone. It's great to see so much audience participation, and we're really looking forward to this session on integrating livestock methane into NDCs. And we have a very highly esteemed panel today of experts presenters, and I'll be giving just a quick introduction on our CCAC guidance on integrating agricultural methane into NDCs, and then pass it to our speakers. So are you able to share the presentation, Amina?
Yes, sure.
Thank you. So, as I mentioned, we'll be presenting the guidance that we have on agricultural methane into NDCs. We have a whole suite of guidance on our webpage that you can find on integrating all superpollutants into NDCs, and this guidance covers all sectors: agriculture, energy, and waste. And in terms of a little bit of an overview of the NDCs and the mandate to include NDCs. So this all came from the Paris Agreement and some of the following decisions, such as the CMA decisions, the so-called Paris Rulebook, as well as the Global Stocktake. It happens every 5 years, so this year being the new cycle of the NDCs, and critically, it's the final NDC before the 2030 target. It should include all greenhouse gases, all economic sectors, and all categories, and it should align with the 1.5 degree Celsius temperature target of the Paris Agreement. The NDCs should also include information to support clarity, transparency, and understanding so that there's uniformity across the NDCs and they can be easily interpreted by outside parties. They should also be progressively more ambitious, so the cycle every 5 years, more ambitious than the previous NDC, and reflect the highest possible ambition. And so, of course, taking into consideration the different national circumstances. And the CCAC recommendations to enhance ambition in NDCs are also included within this guidance, and they include economy-wide targets of both carbon dioxide as well as non-CO2 pollutants across all sectors. So that includes methane, as well as black carbon, hydrofluorocarbons, nitrous oxide, and so forth. And today we'll be focusing on livestock and methane. B, integrating air quality planning and climate strategies. So a core focus of the Climate and Clean Air Coalition is really looking at this nexus of air quality and climate. And there's a lot of co-benefits of methane mitigation with reducing tropospheric ozone, which is a component of smog. C, we recommend harnessing related global, regional, and national strategies. Many countries already have strategies that are looking at short-lived climate pollutants, that are looking at methane, and so integrating those strategies into the NDCs. And finally, comprehensive reporting on non-CO2 pollutants. So really making sure that you're reporting not only on carbon dioxide, but also on the other greenhouse gases. In terms of policy recommendations, we recommend including specific reduction measures that reduce methane from agriculture. So today we'll be really looking at the livestock sector, but in terms of agriculture and your NDCs, also looking at rice cultivation and other emissions from crop production. Establishing baseline and projections of emissions, so understanding your baseline emission inventories as well as projecting future emissions under different scenarios. And here, having strong MRV systems, moving from Tier 1 to Tier 2 inventories, for example, is critical for really understanding the what your current baseline is and how you can reduce emissions in the future. Aligning climate and other agreements. And so again, integrating across different strategies, but also thinking across different sectors. So integrating climate into agriculture policy, for example, and really ensuring alignment between different ministries of government. Leveraging co-benefits. There are many co-benefits of mitigation from the agriculture sector. There can be health benefits, again, from the air quality improvements. There can be improvements in food security and increasing resilience of agricultural production, improving the economic and environmental co-benefits. And so really building consensus from the sector and from stakeholders within the sector, making sure you're engaging those stakeholders, involving them in the local government processes, and really bringing private sector and communities into a lot of the consultations around the NDCs, which measures are feasible in the country, how what support those communities need in order to mitigate, and so forth. And finally, again, related to the baseline and projections, having a robust monitoring and reporting mechanism to track progress and really understanding how measures in the livestock sector, especially, relate to methane emissions. So tracking animal health, for example, and the impact that that has on methane emissions, or different feed compositions that the cattle are eating, and how that impacts methane emissions. In terms of enhancing information clarity, transparency, and understanding, there are 6 key steps. 1, again, establishing comprehensive emissions inventories so that others can look at the inventory and understand what is the composition of emissions across all greenhouse gases. Setting clear and measurable goals and targets to developing transparent MRV systems to measure progress towards those transparent goals. Integrating air quality co-benefits into climate reporting. So again, looking at the impact that methane reduction has on reducing tropospheric ozone and smog, and as well looking at other pollutants such as black carbon and the impacts they have both on air quality and climate. strengthening institutional capacity for transparency, making sure that there are many different stakeholders within the government who are able to understand the reporting frameworks, who are understanding the MRV, and are able to strengthen that policy component and institutional capacity within the government. Promoting public engagement and stakeholder involvement, again, bringing the sector into the decision-making process is critical for getting their buy-in into the NDCs and into the mitigation actions. And so really making sure you're bringing in farmer organizations, bringing in key private sector companies that are interacting directly with the farmers, who are able to provide feedback on which mitigation measures are feasible within the country, what a mitigation plan might look like for the sector in terms of implementation, and which goals are feasible. And then reporting on cross-border impacts and regional cooperation. And so looking not only at the impacts in your own country, but also across borders. And in the livestock sector, that can be really critical because there's a lot of movement of livestock. And so there's a lot of impacts in terms of measuring and reporting on the livestock when there's so much movement as well. So just to give some examples of how countries are including livestock methane emissions reductions into their NDCs, Burundi, in terms of its targets, set a sectoral conditional target of a percentage reduction of methane. And the conditional reduction pledge is to reduce methane emissions from enteric fermentation by 3% below 2015 levels by 2030. And this pledge also estimates a mass unit reduction of 22.6 GG of methane. And a second example is Bangladesh, and again, a sectoral, but both conditional and unconditional target. And here they frame it in terms of number of animals. So Bangladesh pledges to reduce methane emissions from enteric fermentation by replacing low productive animals with high producing crossbred cattle and feed improvements. And so, and this incorporates both unconditional and conditional pledges based on the number of head of large and small ruminants affected. Finally, Guatemala, again, a sectoral target for agriculture, and quantifying this target in terms of CO2 equivalent. They pledge to reduce 0.637 million tons of CO2 equivalent through specific categories of mitigation activities in the ag sector. And so, for example, adopting intensive rotational grazing practices in at least 40,000 hectares of pasture land. And so these three examples give you really an idea of how other countries are integrating livestock into their NDCs, the different ways that you can categorize the reduction targets in terms of methane reduction directly, in terms of CO2 equivalent, as well as in terms of impact on a number of livestock. And the CCAC guidance supports the preparation and reporting phases of the NDC cycle. It incorporates information collection, assessment, consideration of outputs, recommendations to include in the new NDCs, and transparency and reporting. So you can find all of these phases of the NDC cycle in our CCAC guidance. And it also includes options for financing to support effective implementation and reporting. So opportunities to look for financing to support your NDC progress. And so you can find our NDC guidance here at this webpage. And thank you very much. And now I'm very honored to introduce our panel, our speakers. And so I'll be going speaker by speaker. First, we have a presentation by Alexandra Wybieralska. She is a climate change specialist at FAO, working on tracking progress of agricultural integration into NDCs. And so she'll be presenting a little bit of FAO's work on tracking progress of agricultural methane integration into NDCs. Thanks. Looking forward to your presentation, Alexandra.
Yes, thank you. Can you see my slides well? Okay, fantastic. Okay, welcome everyone. So, as well introduced, my name is Alexandra Wybieralska. I'm the climate change specialist in the Office of Climate Change, Biodiversity and Environment at FAO. And today I'll be stepping in on behalf of Crystal Crumbler, that unfortunately wasn't able to join today. And I'll give you a brief summary of the state of agricultural methane policies in the second round of NDCs. So as a team in FAO, we have conducted an analysis of all second rounds, so the latest, the last round of NDC submissions, to basically take stock of the state of inclusion of agri-food system related components in the NDCs. And I present some of the most important and relevant indicators and findings that we have made related to mitigation ambition and in particular inclusion of methane contributions in agriculture. Overall, our analysis has shown that there was an increase in the quality of mitigation contributions in a follow sector compared to the first round of NDCs, and in particular, the NDC 2.0 have seen a higher inclusion of follow-specific greenhouse gas targets, and as well as mitigation actions and indicators developed for tracking those mitigation actions. At the same time, not only has the quality of mitigation ambition increased, but also the coverage of different subsectors and subsystems of follow and agri-food systems more broadly. For example, livestock has seen a substantial increase from 27% to almost half of NDCs. So currently, almost half of NDCs do cover livestock and grassland systems in their NDCs, as well as, for example, energy, which also is at a similar level of 53% of inclusion. Interestingly, most of the actions related to energy are related to, for example, manure for biogas production. So it's also very relevant to livestock. Looking at the left side of the slide, you can see that generally almost all NDCs do have GHG-related GHG targets economy-wide, with agriculture and CH4 methane covered, but please note that this doesn't disaggregate between the gases and the sector, so we don't know the exact contribution of sector and gas disaggregation. So in order to do that, we looked a bit more in detail. So we do know that, for example, 31% of all NDCs have agriculture sector level target with CH4 included. But unfortunately, we do know that not a single NDC, that NDC 2.0, had any agricultural sector level methane target only, so targets specific to only to methane. So there might be still some subsectorals, but at the sector level, we don't have this disaggregation of methane only targets. Next, when we look at the specific measures that countries present and propose, on the right side, we know that 51% of all NDCs have agricultural methane relevant mitigation measures, but only 13 of all NDCs have methane relevant measures with mitigation targets included, and only 4% have both quantified and time-bound methane specific targets. Interestingly, these targets can be both greenhouse gas and non-greenhouse gas related. You can see examples in the table below. So you can see a quite interesting range of different targets included, also the non-greenhouse gas related. And overall, my message from this slide is to say that really few NDCs explicitly target agricultural methane and do have targets related to that. At the same time, when we do compare the sources of agricultural methane emissions based on FAO stat, with mitigation policies proposed from NDCs at the global level, there is generally a very good policy coverage. Bear in mind that this is at the global level, so this trend does not necessarily reflect country level coverage of policies, for which we did a very more specific and detailed country level analysis. So when we look deeper level at the country level, so basically at the policies and measures that countries propose and target methane emissions, we found that there is actually a very significant mitigation policy coverage gap. So on country level, 61% of CH4 emissions are not covered by concrete mitigation actions in the NDCs. And we look at this, if we look at this trend at the regional level, the biggest gaps are in East Asia and Pacific and North America in terms of the percentages of emissions covered or not covered. And in terms of the actual magnitude, that would be the East Asia and the Pacific again, and Sub-Saharan Africa. And if you present basically the same results at the country income level, we see an interesting pattern that the highest policy coverage is in low income countries. Yet at the same time, these are also the countries that historically are the least responsible for climate change. And at the same time, in terms of the magnitude, the greatest policy coverage gap is in both middle income and in high income countries. Mitigation action gaps are also the highest with respect to the short-term climate pollutants, so nitrous oxide and methane, which we know are very essential for the more short-term greenhouse gas targets, especially in terms of limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees by 2030. And based on the same analysis I've just shown you, we know that only 39% of agricultural methane emissions are covered by current climate policies, but we have also disaggregated it by basically emission sources in agriculture. So if we look at those, we see very interestingly that the greatest gaps in terms of the magnitude are found with respect to enteric fermentation and rice cultivation. And there's actually barely any coverage in emissions from savanna fires and the crop residue burning, but at the same time, they do represent only a small fraction, small share of overall sectoral emissions of methane. So this is the end of my technical part, but I'm happy to answer any questions you might have later on. But I would also really like to highlight some of the FAO's key programs and tools that basically are supporting countries in data-driven NDC 3.0 submissions. We're supporting 12 countries as part of the CBIT Afolu Plus project. It's called the Global Capacity Building Towards Enhanced Transparency Program. And we're supporting countries in basically developing better targets towards including agricultural methane emissions. And I also put in the blue some relevant FAO tools and learning platforms that include e-learning course on agriculture and enteric fermentation using Tier 2, NDC expert tool, also called NEXT, which conducts ex-ante analysis of mitigation action potential, and NDC tracking tool, which supports countries in tracking NDC implementation and progress in the AFOLO sector, also in the mitigation part. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alexandra. And it's great to see all of those tools that FAO has available. And so we'll be sharing these slides with all of you. And so if you're interested in any of those tools, you'll be able to follow up and see what those look like and how they might support you in supporting your national policy making goals. And so,
Yes.
Thank you again. And now I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Aimable Uizeye, who's also at FAO. He is a livestock policy officer and leading a lot of work on livestock integration into national climate policies. And he'll be presenting today on livestock mitigation measures and inclusion into NDCs. So with that, I'll pass the floor to you, Aimable.
Thank you so much, Greg. I hope you can hear me and see my slides. Thank you. So I will try to navigate through this presentation by highlighting the role of livestock mitigation measures in the NDC. I will take more a broader perspective and come back with some country examples where, of course, I will try also to go beyond the nationally determined contributions, which are the voluntary documents that the countries submit under the Paris Agreement, as opposed to the national policies that are binding on at the national level and also guide the implementation of livestock development objectives as well as climate policies at country level. So my presentation will be in 5 parts, and I will start just reminding ourselves why livestock is important. So currently, looking at life cycle assessment, livestock contribute about 12% to the total anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions, and with about 6.2 gigaton of CO2 equivalent. So methane alone contribute about 54% with 3.3 gigaton along the life cycle. But if we look at the animals, so the enteric methane represent about 85%, while the manure management systems represent 15%. If we zoom in and we look at which country contribute to the livestock emissions, if we consider methane, we see that around 81% of total methane emissions are concentrated in only 28 countries. Most of them are from no OECD countries, and also we have a couple of countries from OECD countries, so meaning that high income countries that are represented on this graph. So when at FAO we analyze the mitigation potential, so we look at what would be the emissions in 2050. So based on FAO projections, it is estimated that in 2050, livestock emissions will increase by around 40%, so moving from 6 gigaton to 9 gigaton. And we see that some mitigation potential like dietary change or reduction of food loss and waste will reduce a little bit the emissions because of course there will be some corrections across different high income versus low income groups, which will make this strategy contribute to less than 5% of emission reduction. But if we look at what we call on-farm measures, that's the part of, for example, rumen manipulation and other strategy like genetic improvement, feed and nutrition improvement, improvement of animal health. We see that those strategies can reduce up to 20% of emissions globally, which is really good news. So meaning that we can invest more on on-farm measures to reduce emissions in the livestock sector. Other strategies that are on farm but include also no livestock activities, especially like carbon sequestration or circular bioeconomy, renewable energy, can also contribute between 1 to 6%. So why we talk about national determined contributions? We know that through the recent report of IPCC during the assessment report 6, we found out that the current NDC commitments are mainly taking us really off the target of the Paris Agreement of limiting the global average temperature increase below 1.2 degree and also preferably to 1.5. So meaning that countries are invited to really increase their ambition of their climate commitment, especially during the NDC 3.0 cycle. So so far we looked at the situation. So if you go to the UNFCCC website, you will see the biennial transparency report portal. So far, if we look at the BTR, we found out that only 102 countries have submitted their biennial transparency report. And we see some good progress where countries have mentioned specific policies that are supporting mitigation and adaptation to climate change, and whereas including strong analysis on greenhouse gas accounting and also removals. When we look at the NDC, at least this is the situation in May, we saw that only 24 countries have submitted so far their NDC 3.0. Among those countries, half of them have specific livestock mitigation options that are around low emissions livestock, climate smart agriculture, manure management, animal health, feed additive, and so on. So beside the NDC, we looked at what countries really are doing. So here are example of a couple of policies. We can see that EU has a specific methane reduction strategy, which of course is still under discussion now because the current tendency is not to include agriculture, but I see that there is a quite interesting move on considering livestock there. So the ABC methane reduction target for the livestock in Brazil. We have the methane emission reduction in livestock program in Australia, which is a government-led, also private sector. It's a kind of partnership between government and private sector to reduce emissions from livestock. So in Denmark, we see a very strong move on first methane reduction targets in livestock that will be implemented by 2030. And New Zealand has specific target on emission reduction in the NDC, and I think there is also an ongoing discussion on including methane emission reduction into as part of the carbon markets. So Vietnam, for instance, also has a methane action plan. Norway has a methane action plan as well. We see strong regulation in Chile on the reduction of methane emission from agriculture. The same for Argentina, where carbon neutral certification program have been implemented. In Kenya, I see Bernard here. I want to go much more the details on Kenya, but Kenya it has climate smart agriculture strategy, and we have been supporting Kenya on drafting the methane reduction roadmap, which is still under development. And Rwanda has recently published a very interesting policy, which is the livestock development strategy, which includes specific methane reduction strategies within the livestock development policy, which is really very interesting. So when we see what FAO has been doing in supporting countries, more than 118 countries have been supported with a budget of $1.2 billion, especially through the JF and GCF projects, to make sure that the country can move forward in implementing their NDC targets. So we have been supporting countries in integrating livestock-related mitigation adaptation in NDC. This has been with a huge focus in Latin America, Africa, and Asia. This was accompanied with capacity building, knowledge transfer, mobilization of climate finance, with an example of the recent IFAD GCF project in East Africa, which we supported. So, but also developing policy documents, especially methane reduction roadmap. And of course, FAO has a very strong program on sustainable livestock transformation framework, which include the climate action in the livestock. So, of course, addressing the challenges on climate action in livestock is important, but of course, we need to build the basics. So those basics are about developing stronger MRV, monitoring, reporting, and verification systems to make sure that we can monitor and the livestock emissions and the mitigation potential. Mobilizing climate finance, already mentioned that. We need to make sure that the policies are aligned with the climate commitment. And of course, it's important to build also the capacity of the institutions. So as example, we have been engaging with different regions in collaboration with the CIC and the other actors. This is two examples of regional workshop we organized in Asia and also in Africa, with the idea really to strengthen the national teams and also bringing the regional collaboration in mitigation. The other examples here, I will go quickly. So for instance, in Kenya, we developed the feasibility studies for the MRV system and also the roadmap. And in Zimbabwe, we just published this publication on livestock climate action in Zimbabwe, which is also ongoing in Rwanda, where we have the report that will be coming out, but also currently FAO in collaboration with CCAC is developing the methane reduction strategy for Rwanda. So we just completed the project also with CCAC in Central Africa, where stakeholders in Central Africa called for the integration of climate goals into livestock and climate policies, in particular the NDC, by integrating methane emission reduction in the livestock sector. So here quickly some examples of the reports that we published on, those are the country specific reports that are including both the greenhouse gas assessment of the country, but also the policy alignment with the NDC. So this is one of the series that we are doing for many countries. So, so far we have published 4, and there are a couple of other countries underway under publication. So to conclude this, I want to say that it's important to integrate more livestock commitment into NDC. To do so, we are calling for high methane emitting countries to really consider methane because it's an opportunity and it also can generate additional climate finance. We call also for the implementation of innovative technological measures to mitigate methane emissions at scale. We call to also to strengthen data collection and reporting, especially this will enhance transparency and also science-based decision making when it comes to livestock development and also on policy making. And importantly, I want to emphasize this, let's involve our farmers and the livestock producers in designing those mitigation pathways, because farmers are at the center of decision making. So we need to involve the farming communities. So on that, I want to thank you for your attention. Back to you, Greg.
Thank you, Aimable, and thank you for that note, ending on that note of how critical stakeholder engagement, especially with the farmers and livestock keepers, is to this whole process. So it's really great to see all of the knowledge and resources that FAO has on the livestock mitigation practices. And again, we'll share these resources so that you have access after our presentations today. And as our final presenter, I would like to introduce Bernard Kimoro. He's head of climate change and livestock sustainability at the Ministry of Agriculture and Livestock Development in Kenya. And he's worked very closely with FAO and CCAC on livestock methane mitigation. And so we're really honored to have your presentation on this country experience of how Kenya, a country where livestock is really critical to the economy, how you've been able to integrate livestock methane mitigation into your NDC and climate policy. Thank you. Hand it to you.
Thank you very much, Gregory and the team from CCSE and also our colleagues from FAO. So as introduced, my name is Bernard Kimoro. I work in the Ministry of Agriculture and Livestock Development, State Department for Livestock Development, where I had a section called Climate Change and Livestock Sustainability. I'll have a quick presentation about what we have done to try and integrate the issues around methane into our NDC. And I hope you can see my slides there.
We can see the slides, mode? But yeah, presentation mode.
Yeah.
Perfect. Now
should
it's good.
Be. Yeah.
Thank
okay,
you.
Thank you. Yeah. So this will be key takeaways, which I hope I can revert to after the presentation. Basically, just to highlight some of the issues that we have also experienced in Kenya, but I can come to that. Yeah, so as an introduction, I think if you look at Kenya, as in other developing countries, we rely on the land, agriculture and land use sectors. And because of that, most of our emissions, if you look at the country, most of the emissions are actually from the AFOLU sector, and this has been highlighted by our colleagues. For us in Kenya, we look at the issues around emissions in the agriculture sector, 90% or even more actually come from livestock. If you aggregate all that from the agriculture sector, that is about 30% of the national emissions. Whether you're looking at the methane, we are looking at nitrous oxides and the other greenhouse gases. And as a result of that, it then becomes very important for the livestock sector to be part of the climate mitigation targets. And Kenya has really identified it as one of the key sectors that is going to support the issue of emission reduction in the country. So this is what I'm saying. Kenya's landmass is basically predominated by livestock. Over 86% of the country is arid and semi-arid, less than 600 millimeters of rainfall, only good for livestock, not very good for crops unless under irrigation, which is quite expensive. And if you look at the, like I've mentioned previously, if you look at the livestock supply chains, they contribute 30% of our national emissions. Last year we gave a third national communication to the UNFCCC, and it was estimated that 32% of all the emissions in the country are actually from the agriculture, and if we quantify the livestock emissions, they are 30% of the national emissions. And most of those emissions, over 90% that are coming from livestock, are actually methane from enteric fermentation and also manure management systems. So it's very important for us to address this issue of methane by looking at how we can bring in interventions in livestock. We did what we call the short-lived National Climate Action Plan, or the SNAP, which is still in a draft form. And this highlighted the issues around methane in the different sectors of Kenya. Looking at it, it's very evident because if you look at 2022, for example, around 2022, 2023, if most of the methane in Kenya, the highest proportion of methane in Kenya is actually from livestock. Very little is coming from rice production because we are not really a big rice producer. But what is coming out very clearly is that most of the emissions, which are indicated in the deep blue there, if you can see it, as non-energy agriculture, is actually methane that is coming from livestock. And this is projected to increase if we don't do or we don't have any interventions up to 2050. From the third national communication, that is what is the situation for the agriculture sector. And if you look very clearly at the very top, methane is the highest with 31 gigaton of carbon dioxide equivalent out of the total 36 in the agriculture sector. So that is what we are saying. 87% of all emissions are methane. We also have methane that is coming from manure management, which is 4.2. So in total, methane from livestock in the agriculture sector is almost 92%, which is quite high. And this is the scenario in terms of the trends from 1990, again from the third national communication. No, this was from the SNAP document. If you look at it, the trend is that there has been increasing methane generated from the agriculture sector and mainly from livestock. Where you see some dips, for example, in 2022, it's because of the livestock numbers went down due to the droughts that occurred And therefore, we are saying we cannot rely on the droughts to kill the animals for us to reduce the methane emissions in the country. We have to have other interventions. Otherwise, if there are no droughts and we have interventions that are actually sustaining the animals, then our methane emissions are going to increase. Due to that, then we decided to have some strategic actions to ensure that we have proper integration of livestock into the climate policies. One of them is that previously we have not had very good coordination among the key ministries, the Ministry of Agriculture, Environment, the Ministry of Planning, National Treasury. So there's been no coordination. What that means is that if we have targets, even if we have targets from livestock, we cannot be able to put them in our climate policies because the environment people are really not very keen on them. So that coordination is very important. At the same time, in terms of looking for resources to mitigate, we also had to think about how to work with the Treasury. The same on strategic action on ensuring that we're identifying and overcoming systemic barriers. Low awareness, generally at the farm level, if you talk about mitigating emissions from animals, it's not a very good communication because farmers don't really bother about that. But then what also became very important is that we also needed to address challenges of inadequate capacity for data collection and also not having the expertise to be able to do the modeling and moving to tier 2, which then gives you the policy levers to identify the areas for mitigation. And then, of course, after you do that, then you need to identify the alternative options. So a strategic action there was also, how do we come up with the mitigation options? What are the alternatives that can enable us to be able to reduce the emissions without really focusing on the reduction of livestock numbers? Can we maintain the numbers the same, but bring in options such as maybe feed additives or, better rations, hard management, and all those kind of things. And then finally, also we needed to, we thought about strengthening of critical sector institutions to have that continuous engagement. At the ministry level, we have the climate change unit. At the State Department level, we have the climate change and livestock sustainability section. And this is the one that has the mandate to ensure that all the targets are included in the climate policies. The targets for livestock, which is very critical, are also part of the NDC of the country, and that will bring in the measures that are required and the policies. So as a result of that, Kenya has really mainstreamed the issues of livestock in national development plans and strategies, as well as in climate policies and strategies. If you look at the sector level, we have the overarching strategy, which is called the Agriculture Sector Transformation and Growth Strategy, which has really addressed the issues of emissions, but also looking at food and nutrition without compromising the issues around food and nutrition, which is the first priority, and then emissions is also looked at as one of the challenges. But more importantly, we have a specific climate change, what we call the Kenya Climate Smart Agriculture Strategy and its implementation framework, which has identified the different interventions which are required to reduce emissions from the agriculture sector, and focusing mainly on livestock. And this has been the one that, of course, given the targets, which we have then put in the nationally determined contribution, especially the updated one from 2020. We had the INDC in 2016, but this was updated in 2020, basically because we had this strategy in place. So this is a NDC. As I said, we submitted the INDC, the first one in 2016. It is economy-wide, focusing on the critical emission sectors, key emission sectors, but also those ones which are affected by impact of climate change. So those ones that require adaptation. So our NDC has both the adaptation and mitigation. The first NDC, before we updated the NDC, we had an ambition of reducing emissions by 30% relative to the business as usual, which had been calculated at 143 million tons of carbon dioxide by 2030. But after revision, we identified the technical options, and we revised it upwards and enhanced our ambition to 32% below 143 million tons by 2030. So that is how it is structured. For the NDC, the current NDC, we had a specific livestock methane target in the current NDC. Of course, as far back as 2017, we started developing what we call the Dairy Nationally Appropriate Mitigation Action, which is the Dairy NAMA. The target was to reach 267,000 households, which is basically around 15% of Kenya's households which are involved in dairy. They are looking at two aspects that will reduce emissions, mainly methane. One is how do we bring in technologies to enhance methane emission intensity reduction, and also issues around manure management. Basically, all that will then result into emission reduction of 8.8 million carbon dioxide equivalent of methane. We used Tier 2 to be able to give that justification for this particular project, which is included as a emission reduction in the NDC, the current NDC. But that is not the story. Dairy only produces about 19% of our livestock emissions. The bigger chunk is actually from non-dairy ruminants, especially the non-dairy cattle, which is, as you can see, 42%. Of course, you also have the camels, sheep, and the goats. So what that tells you is that we have a very high potential if you also target the non-dairy ruminants, which contribute about 81% of the methane that we have from livestock. So we have been targeting dairy only because it is a very well-structured enterprise, but we also now want to start focusing on the non-dairy ruminants, which also have significantly very high emissions in terms of methane. To support us, we then came up with a study which was supported by New Zealand government that was to enable us identify what are the specific actions that we needed. We did that just before the updating. We identified the key categories that we need to work with, the inventory improvement and iterations, especially for non-dairy ruminants, and also the need for a livestock climate change action plan and methane roadmap. So that study actually gave us a very clear direction now to address the issues around methane. So this has been the road before and to the present. So we started with the development of Dairy NAMA in 2015. We did the first dairy inventory using Tier 2 in 2016, 2017. So that gave a concrete indication of the mitigation aspects that we required. We published that in 2022, working with FAO, and through a grant of CCSE, we now started looking at the non-dairy ruminants that I've just talked about. And in 2024, now we have Tier 2 for dairy, cattle, non-dairy cattle, sheep, and goats. But the camels, we are still working on the inventory structure to enhance it. If you look at the current NDC, we only have one mitigation target, very broad, climate smart agriculture in line with Kenya Climate Smart Agriculture Strategy. But this is unpacked in what we call the National Climate Change Action Plan. We have had 3 of them, the first, the second, and the third. The current one is 2023-2027, which we are currently implementing. So for the second one, we only had 2 targets. We wanted to enhance that 2 targets to reduce methane from livestock, enhance efficiency in dairy management in those households, and also adoption of biodigester technology as a methane capture methodology. Further work with partners, like I've said, New Zealand government, CCSC, FAO, also helped us to enhance our technical and institutional capacity, which has led to enhancing our targeting of methane in the sector. So these are some of the documents. I think Amable already mentioned the dairy tier 2. We are also now just publishing the updated one. Again, I think Amable also mentioned some of the work that we have done and also work he has done in other countries. I want to mention the National Climate Change and Methane Reduction Roadmap for Livestock Subsector in Kenya as one of the work that is there. From the SNAP, we did a technical analysis of the mitigation potential, and we realized that by 2050 we can be able to reduce about 50%. About 21% of methane from livestock. By 2050. So if you put in structures, I think again Amable mentioned about putting in interventions at the farm level, we can be able to arrive at around 20%, 21%, and it's within what Amable talked about. For the third NCAP, we have now become even more clearer working with the partners. We have enhanced our ambitions in terms of how much we want to reduce. We, instead of targeting this 267, we now want to target 500,000. And here we have been very clear on the specific areas that we want to target. Issues around climate smart technologies, innovations and management practices, especially on feeds, breeding and animal health. So we are very clear in the current NDC. We have also looked at the issues of vaccination, of course, but more importantly, in the non-dairy, we are looking at sustainable grazing management and silvopastoralism to improve the quality of the feeds. Also, the aspect of improving the quality of the feeds by having what you call the feed banks. For Kenya's third NDC, or second NDC, or NDC 3.0, we have even become now more specific. We can now confidently mention the issue of methane emission reduction. So we have also targeted another 500,000 for dairy sector by increasing productivity with reduced methane emission in that number of households with about 1.8 million cattle with those interventions I've talked about. For non-dairy, we have talked about low emission livestock offtake for 100,000 livestock units. So we didn't mention methane specifically because this is very land-based, and that's why we see we have been a bit more broad with that. But for manure management, we have talked about adoption of the digester, and again, the high ambition, focusing on biodigesters, of course, and composting is one of them. The specific interventions are there for dairy, proper rations, animal health, deworming, herd management at farm level, environment, or what we call bioclimatology. For non-dairy ruminants, again, the same thing that I already mentioned up there. I wouldn't want to go into this because of what we have done using Tier 2, creating the evidence. Of course, you have had a benefit of getting investment. The latest one, which is also going to address the issues of methane, is a regional dairy NAMA GCF funded initiative. It's called Dairy Interventions for Mitigation and Adaptation. It's a regional program, almost 400 million USD, but 70 million for Kenya, and it will specifically address methane reduction and further increasing the ambition that we have in methane reduction from the dairy. Of course, we have some early results. We see the interventions are leading to, increasing productivity, incomes, reducing animal mortalities where we have other investments, but also reducing emissions by up to 20%, which is quite substantial. So I think I would like to stop there. I don't want to go a lot over time, But just to go to the key messages I'd put there, I think for us, livestock sector is the most, in most LMICs, I think, contribute the highest. I think it's evident from what we have in Kenya. Over 80%, again, it was mentioned by the previous speakers. Sometimes we look at that as livestock being a culprit, but I think there is now opportunity to look at it in terms of being an opportunity for mitigation. But we need to address some structural issues, awareness, data challenges, institutional and technical capacity for that to happen. And I think FAO has already mentioned the plan they have, the CBIT plus. So the structural changes and targeted should ensure the livestock is a solution to methane reduction. I think that is what we need to look at. And finally, I also want to echo what Mapude said. Let's work with the farmers. I think that is where we have the highest opportunity to be able to address some of these challenges. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bernard. It's always interesting to hear a country example and to see all of the action that you've taken in Kenya to identify these mitigation options and then go into the implementation phase, and all of the different interventions that came from the policy side to get to this result of finally implementing and receiving this finance for implementation. And thank you for those key takeaways. Always interesting to hear as well how these mitigation opportunities have benefits for food security, as you mentioned, in terms of increased production, for farmer livelihoods, increasing the income, increasing the animal welfare in terms of animal health, and also mitigating the methane emissions. So really great to hear that example. So we have about 20-25 minutes for questions. We've gotten a couple of questions in the Q&A, and I tried to respond already to some of those, but and I see a hand, so I'll pass it to Julian Chara.
Thank you, Gregory, and thanks, Bernard, for the interesting presentation on the experience in Kenya. I would like to ask you if how are you planning to actually put these strategies in place regarding how to reach all that amount of households, and with the extension services or things that may really produce the change in the farms?
So do I answer directly?
Yes, please.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, and thanks, William. Nice to hear from you. Like I said, we had in place as far back as 2017, we had what we call the dairy NAMA. The dairy NAMA targeted 267,000 households, which is basically almost slightly more than 1.4 million direct beneficiaries, holding about that would be around about 1 million animals, basically. So how to reach this is basically through extension advisory services, taking out what you call the technologies, innovations, and management practices. Luckily, in the livestock sector, we already have the technologies which are readily ready for dissemination. If you think about the issues around, for example, rations, this is something that we have been doing for very many years in Kenya. For example, the issues around maybe incorporation of high quality fodder, high protein fodder materials like from fodder trees. This is something we have been doing. So the idea is to come up with a project or a program, and that is what we have done in Kenya. We now have a regional project that is going to disseminate these technologies, working through the we work through the county extension or the sub-national level extension to disseminate these technologies. And this project has a very robust system for data collection. We intend to reach all the farmers to be able to identify the challenges they have. Through the extension system, then we can be able to deliver the technologies that's critical. For smallholder intensive farmers, for example, manure management is part of their fertilizer that is used on the farm. So how do we ensure that the period from the animal to the use on the land is such that we minimize the emissions from the kind of manure that we're getting from there? So programs and the projects is what we are looking at, and we have quite a number. I showed a few. We have quite a number. Currently, we have about 6 projects which are already running, and which are supporting some of these interventions that we are delivering to the farmers. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
And then we have another question from Gopal Krishna Debnath. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Actually, agricultural production is most vital for food security for human life. Livestock production the same. What is the best practices in the globally running at present so that optimum methane emission, optimum black carbon emission is happening? Collect this document from global research, global sourcing, and disseminate this technology globally so that whole people, farmers, can practice it. Mainly farmers, I am from Bangladesh, South Asia. Farmers are poor people, farmers are illiterate people, farmers are less money people, poor people. So they cannot practice costly subject. So if you can disseminate this technology, say alternate wetting and drying, AWD, is a good practice. We know that, but in practice, farmers do not know it, do not practice it. Don't burning dried up leaves or after harvesting rest of the transits. But they are doing there because they do not know it. So more training, more capacity development needed so that farmers can practice it, and after practicing, doing and learning and doing more and more, they will develop themselves. My request, this type of workshop is very webinar important. At the same time, good practices should be disseminated, should be circulated globally, so that the central command will be happen, and where is the lapses, it will be find out, and more training will be given to the farmers on this side. Thank you.
Thank you for that question. Those are 2 kind of critical elements I think you brought up, is the cost of implementation and how do we work with farmers to reduce costs of implementation, and then the second component around capacity building. It's a question that came up twice in the chat as well, and I tried to reply a little initially there about some of the cost-benefit analysis that can be conducted. I provided an example of the work we've done with Bernard and Aimable in Kenya, and the cost-benefit analysis in terms of understanding the specific mitigation opportunities that are available in each country, and understanding those national considerations in terms of cost and the benefits to farmers. I saw as well, Aimable, you had your hand up, and I was wondering if you wanted to also share a little bit about your experience in terms of capacity building in countries, and how you've been working with both the national policy level side, but also with the farmers and livestock keepers to share these kind of co-benefits between mitigation and economic livelihoods for the farming sector.
Yeah, actually, you are saying cost benefit analysis. Okay, if it is losing business with farming, with agriculture, farmers will do that because they do not know any other profession. It is the only profession they know how to cultivate rice, how to cultivate paddy, how to cultivate jute and maize, like this. So loss and gain, not their concern. said they have land, they have to do something, they have to eat something, so they will follow it.
So,
So, Greg, may I go ahead and
yes,
respond?
please.
Yeah, thank you. So, yeah, I think it's important, of course, to understand the national context because, of course, each country has its own context. But it's important, of course, to raise awareness of the farmers themselves. I would say that so far, mostly the institutions and the stakeholders are aware of the challenge and also are trying to find the solutions. But in many countries, farmers are not aware. So raising awareness is important. So we are working in Bangladesh as well. Thanks to Gopal for asking this question. Actually, we did a very interesting publication for young people on livestock and climate action. That is illustrative, and I just want to say that now in Bangladesh it has been translated in local language, and I think the government took over that publication. They are distributing more than 20,000 copies of that publication to raise awareness of the community on how livestock climate action are important. And I think those type of materials that are illustrative, that really show how farmers how they can improve them what they do, and also increase their income. So those are important. One of the main aspects to mention is that not only in Bangladesh but in all countries, mitigation options should be aligned with the livestock development objectives. So what I mean is that we should increase productivity and generate more income for farmers if we want to have farmers on board to implement those solutions. Because mitigation are expensive, and of course, in a certain level, we need the incentives to make sure that farmers are able to implement some of the solutions. And I think there have been many incentives. If you can look at many projects on biogas, for example, that has been provided as subsidies from governments. But of course, those were mainly done not for mitigation purpose, but for energy transition purpose. But I think that's one of example on how government can work hand in hand with farmers and the community to find solutions. Yeah, over to you, Greg.
Thank you, Emma. And then we have another question from Ariful, also from University of Dhaka, so from Bangladesh. The floor is yours. I think you're muted, Ariful.
Oh, thank you. So I was unmuted. Hello, I'm Ariful Islam, and assalamu alaikum. Before I said that, I introduce myself. I'm from a village, especially I know how to rear cow and livestock, and I do in my village agriculture activities as well, alongside studying at the University of Dhaka. Okay. If I see that in a country, we see two types of livestock production system, which is the subsistence level and like commercial activities. In the commercial activities, we have the opportunity to deal that type of action, we can pressurize the commercial institutions so that they can take action. That they mitigate action. I know how to mitigate exactly the whole emission of methane and carbon dioxide. But on the other hand, if we see that there the another option, the subsistence level agriculture, which I do exactly, and my neighbors from villagers, and they also do that. And if we say if they are given any incentives to collaborate with other, so that they can collect their trash and exactly I heard and that among the presenter who said that I forgotten his name. I'm sorry. He said that a biogas system, which is very impactful in Bangladesh. I see in my village, who exactly a commercial industrial producer and he produces biogas from the livestock, and his sells around his neighbors, towards neighbors. So if we work in collaborative system, if we collaborate each other, and for this collaboration, we need some assistance, like LDC countries. They need assistance, so they can work for mitigation. So is there any policy option so that the INGO and NGO or local government to collaborate here, and how the system should be, and who will fund in this case? Please and answer kindly answer and on my this option. I hope that there will be best solution for this kind of problem that arises after the fieldwork study that you have chosen. Thank you.
Thank you for that question. So if I understood correctly, you were asking about biogas and the costs of implementation for the farmers, and really working together with what are the opportunities specifically around policy for working with the sector to increase adoption of that technology. Was that the question?
Yeah, that's the question.
Okay. Yeah, so I would say say that it's more of a policy process rather than one specific policy that leads to either, one type of funding mechanism for biogas or another one, or whatever mitigation solution you're looking at, but more of a process of stakeholder engagement from the government throughout, this climate policy framework to work together to understand what are the mitigation opportunities, what are the costs for implementation of those mitigation solutions, and working together with the sector to collaboratively develop financing mechanisms and solutions for adoption of those technologies on farms. And so that can start as a process of first looking at what are the mitigation opportunities in your country. Again, as Amabla mentioned, these can vary quite a bit. Different country contexts will have very different mitigation solutions for the livestock sector. And then also, this is an area where MRV is really critical, and understanding what are your baseline emissions and really being able to understand the exact mitigation that you're achieving through implementation of those measures. And once you have that kind of baseline established, that can lead to more specific policy proposals where you look at funding mechanisms. And so again, the Kenya example is really interesting, where Kenya was able to establish the policy baselines, moving from a tier 1 to tier 2 inventory, understanding the specific mitigation opportunities for the dairy sector in Kenya, and then working with international financial institutions like the World Bank and IFAD to develop financial strategies in terms of how to work with farmers, build capacity, and actually implement those measures on farms. And so it's really a multi-stage process, and that's why the stakeholder engagement at every stage is so critical. One, with the farmers, but also with the private sector, whether it's the producers of those technologies or aggregators like dairy companies or beef processors. And then also working with NGOs, like you were saying, who are working directly with the sector to promote adoption of climate smart mitigation technologies. So it's a very kind of country-specific process and a multi-stage process. And so that's how we've seen this kind of help foster adoption of these mitigation technologies in different countries. Did any of the other speakers want to add anything from their experience?
I think Greg, you've put it very well there, because it has to start from the policy. Then you have your clear targets, and then you get the resources. Like I said, we now have a project that is going to incentivize, especially the smallholder farmers in dairy. I mean, to take interventions that can reduce methane emissions from their operations, whether it is taking a low interest kind of or a subsidized kind of financing facility, or whether it is because we're also working on something we are calling the Green Dairy Financing Facility in this project, where we want to incentivize the ones who are actually implementing the proper interventions by giving them very low interest rate financing to be able to continue investing in the good technologies, whether it is at the feeding, whether it is at the breeding. There already exists most of this, but the idea is how do we incentivize them, and also looking at the market side of it, because yes, we focus on food production first, but if you have excess, then you have to take it to the market. How do you ensure that you don't have a challenge also in the marketing? So you have to look at it in terms of the whole value chain, or the agri-food system kind of approach. So you're looking at giving incentives at the various levels or within the agri-food system itself, from inputs all the way to the consumer level. Yeah.
Thank you. And then we have another question from Never Gariromo. The floor is yours.
Yeah, my question is the first one is a follow-up on the last question or the last speaker, which you said there is something that happened with the biogas in another country. And is there a good option where we have this kind of, I would say, my question is, do we have something that has been done already in another country in terms of methane avoidance, methane emission reduction from agricultural livestock that we can learn from? That would be my question, number one. And also, my other question would be, do we have an MRV setup that has been done by one country, which has come up with this good MRV that people can say we want to learn from them? Those are the two questions. And also, finally, I would like to comment on the biogas aspect, because I understand there's a certain company in America which is producing biogas plants which are made from PVC or rotten, and they have come up with a cleaning system which cleans the biogas of the hydrosulfur, and they are able to put it into tanks and then distribute it for cooking for people. So I see on the mitigation side, we have quite a number of technologies that can be used. But maybe my two questions as I conclude is, do we have somewhere where we have a country that has done well on emission reduction of methane from livestock in agriculture, apart from what we've heard from Kenya on the NAMA? And also, I mean, we want to take it as a point of reference where we can learn from. And then also, especially the MRV aspect. We have a country that has got a very good MRV that we can say, no, we can learn from them and can use it as a resource of while we are doing our own MRV. Thank you so much.
Thank you. If I understood correctly, you were asking about country experiences of methane mitigation and what were some best practices that could maybe be learned by other countries, and then also around MRV, examples of implementation of MRV practices, which is also a question I'm seeing in the chat and the Q&A around kind of methane monitoring solutions, best practices for collecting, processing data and using it for decision making. So maybe I think in terms of some of those examples, country examples that we've seen on the CCAC website, we have quite a few resources around different countries that we've supported to reduce methane emissions from livestock. We've seen very good examples in different continents and different country contexts. We have examples from Costa Rica, from Uruguay, from Kenya. And so you can find some of those resources on our website. And I'm sure FAO also has examples of some of the methane mitigation that they've supported in different countries and the different country experiences. But I think this question around MRV, we only have about 3 minutes left, but I think it's a really critical question. So I think this question around MRV is really important to discuss about what are some of those best practices for developing MRV systems. And I was wondering if Aimable or Bernard, if you would be able to speak about some of your experiences in moving from a tier 1 to tier 2 inventory, whether it's the Kenya country experience or some of the experience you've had in Aimable supporting various different countries in that process.
So maybe I can say something and then Aimable can add very quickly. One is for you to be able to have very good targets or even very good policies, you have to have a lot of data. And that data is the one that is going to inform your transition from tier 1 to tier 2. Tier 1 is very easy in that if you decide to reduce the methane emissions, then you are saying, I'm just going to reduce the livestock numbers. And in some of the contexts, it's not a very good approach. It may not be very taken very positively by pastoralists, for example. So that is why we need to move to tier 2, which is very data intensive. And it requires, working on it in a very stepwise manner. So tier 2 is more you have disaggregated and identify the policy levers. Do I want to address the issues of the production system, for example? Is it intensive, extensive, or semi-intensive system? Do I want to look at the herd structure? Within the herd structure, do I have more animals which are more productive? And that is what I want to encourage my farmers to keep. Is it the issue of the feed quality by looking at the digestibility of that feed? And so many other things. So it's very important to move from tier 1 to tier 2 because tier 2 then identify the specific area where you shall intervene to be able to reduce your emissions. For us in Kenya, we started one with the dairy because it's a very organized industry, has been in existence since the 50s. So there's a lot of data. And therefore, we were able to move very quickly to quantify emissions using tier 2, which is more advanced. And from there, we were able to identify that we needed to do something on the feeds, something on the breeds, and also something on the manure management, which are really the ones that are generating a lot of emissions. From there, we have worked slowly using available data and building the database for the other species, the beef cattle, the sheep, goats, and we are now working on the camels as well. So you go a lot of data, and that is what you call now developing your MRV system, because you are disaggregating first of all to be able to quantify the emissions using a more advanced emission methodology. That then gives you the targets that you need to put in the NDC. From there, then you are able to get the investment that can be able to support your mitigation actions. Maybe very quickly, because I think we've run short of time. That's what I can say for now.
Thank you, Bernard. That was very comprehensive. And thank you, everyone, for your questions. This has been a very rich discussion. I want to give a very special thank you to all of our speakers. Thank you very much, Alexandra, Aimable, Bernard. And You can find all of these recordings on our websites. We've had webinars for black carbon, for the waste sector, for cooling, and now for livestock methane. And we're really excited to have those resources available to you online. So you are able to find both the recording today as well as all of the presentations. So thank you again for the rich discussion, both in the chat and in the Q&A. And have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
So much.
Thank you.